breaking news, as we are, of course, following the story as the remains of South African Ambassador to France, Nathi Mthethwa, have now arrived at the King Shaka International Airport in KwaZulu-Natal. And for more on this, let's now cross live to a reporter who's currently stationed right at the King Shaka Airport, monitoring all these proceedings for us, Samgele Masego. So, Samgele, it's good to have you with us. So, take us through the current proceedings at the King Shaka Airport, and also talk to us about those that have also gathered to welcome the spirit as well as mortal remains of uNyambose. Who's there?
The mortal remains of Nathi Mthethwa, uNyambose, have essentially arrived here at the King Shaka International Airport. They will be arriving shortly in the next 2 or 3 minutes. As you can see, these vehicles of the provincial leadership of the African National Congress and provincial government. The leader of government, Siboniso Duma, is leading the government delegation. As you can see, he's huddled up there within his vehicle. They did go to the other side of the protocol lounge to receive the mortal remains of uNyambose and also the family of Nathi Mthethwa, who have come with his mortal remains from Paris and France, that they arrived and touched down at the Tambo International Airport at about 9:30 earlier on this morning. Then this afternoon, on a South African Airways aircraft, they did make their way here to the King Shaka International Airport. They will be making their way from the protocol lounge any moment from now. As you can see, the provincial leadership that went to receive him on the other side, they have come this way now in order for the remains. When they arrive, they will ultimately stop here with the remains. The family will come out with the mortal remains of Nathi Mthethwa, and they will ultimately go up this particular alley, going up to the statue of King Shaka. As you know, the history of the Zulu nation, that the Mthethwa family did raise King Shaka. Under the Mthethwa family, they nurtured him, and ultimately Nathi Mthethwa, being a son of the Mthethwa family, will ultimately come through this way to the founder of the Zulu nation, that would be King Shaka, and then ultimately those remains will then come out this particular way as well, and then start making their way up north of the province, going to KwaMbonambi, which is ultimately where Nathi Mthethwa ultimately hails from. But we can say that the mortal remains of Nathi Mthethwa have arrived in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, where he was ultimately born, and his politics was ultimately shaped within this very same district where we are in the eThekwini region of the African National Congress, where he was ultimately applying his political trade, coming from up north of the province. You know that with the discussion we had with Sibusiso Ndebele, the former provincial chair and former premier of KwaZulu-Natal, he was saying that ultimately the ANC had only one branch in the University of Zululand up north of the province. In other areas, they had no entry points until the likes of Nathi Mthethwa were able to penetrate those areas using the banner of the ANC Youth League, which ultimately shaped their political careers. They will be ultimately coming this way. We are anticipating their arrival at any point from now.
Seen over the past few days, since of course the repatriation process began in earnest in Paris, the various Zulu traditional rites that have been performed since Paris, even at the insistence of the family. So I suppose this is still very much an integral part of this process, all the way until the mortal remains of uNyambose will actually be arriving at his final resting place come Sunday.
Indeed, the traditional rituals are playing a pivotal role and pivotal part in this process of bringing back the mortal remains of uNyambose back into the province of KwaZulu-Natal and back into his home area and homestead in KwaMbonambi, and ultimately Isizwe Saka Mthethwa. You do know that they did perform that particular ritual of going with ihlahla and going with a leaf to fetch his spirit and his mortal remains from that particular hotel, the Hyatt Hotel in Paris. They did go there as a family yesterday, and they or the day before, they ultimately went to fetch his spirit from that particular area of that hotel. They did ultimately go back to his official residence in Paris, and then from there the family did come from the province of KwaZulu-Natal, the Mthethwa family, to go and fetch his mortal remains with ihlahla, and they will then ultimately made their way through Air France, coming back into South African soil, touching down at Tambo International Airport this morning at about 9:30, and then they are now ultimately made their way to KwaZulu-Natal, to this particular airport at King Shaka International Airport. You do know that mortal remains don't usually, as we have been explained, that they don't land at small airports. They do usually land at international airports. Thus, he was able to be brought to the aircraft of South African Airways, SAA, the flagship carrier of the country, bringing him to the province of KwaZulu-Natal, and they are now bringing him to the statue of King Shaka to come ukuzobonga emswanini, essentially to touch down and to pay their respects to the founder of this Zulu nation of Amazulu. And ultimately from here he will then go up north to the province, to his homestead, where he will ultimately be laid to rest on Sunday. As you do know that those who go to the Nazareth Baptist Church do practice Sabbath on a Saturday, and they will ultimately not perform any funerals on that particular Saturday as per the customs of the area of KwaMbonambi, and he will ultimately then be laid to rest on Sunday, where everyone will then ultimately be around and will ultimately send him and put him and inter him to his final resting place. So those are the rituals and the customs and the traditions that are ultimately being followed, and him bringing him here does symbolize that particular persistence from the family and from the government side and from the African National Congress side, respecting the wishes of the family.
And it's interesting to know, Samgele, as well, we're getting word that after he arrives at King Shaka Airport, he will then be transported, his mortal remains will then be transported to a mortuary that will be closer to his homestead of KwaMbonambi. And also very interesting, I suppose, while we're speaking of those traditional Zulu rites, Samgele, there is quite a difference when suicide is actually the cause of death. In that instance, the remains are often not even allowed to go inside the main homestead, or if his body has been cleansed outside of what we refer to as umkoka. That requires different sets of traditional rites as well, in accordance, of course, with also family traditions.
Well, the Zulu customs that I've come to know is that if someone commits suicide, they don't give them a befitting burial. In most instances, community members, family members in some instances don't even come to that particular funeral. But in this instance, this time around, with the reports that are coming out and there being no finality in the causes of death of Ambassador Nathi Mthethwa, we can't for certainty say it was a suicide or there was foul play. There are various investigations that have taken place. They did say that there was a scissors found in his hotel room that he had booked, and ultimately brought the days closer when he checked in. There are those allegations of an SMS that he allegedly sent to his spouse or to someone else. And those reports that his phone was found in a park within France, his two phones were found in a park within France. That was later refuted by Dr. Buthelezi, the spokesperson of the family. So there are various contradicting reports that have been disseminated out to the public domain on the passing of Ambassador Nathi Mthethwa. We do have that high-level team by the African Police Service that has ultimately been dispatched by the police commissioner and been dispatched by the Minister of Police, Kachalia, to France to go and investigate the passing and the circumstances around the passing of Ambassador Nathi Mthethwa. So the systems that are being followed this time around are not that of someone who has committed suicide. But on the flip side, another person can say that he was a person of stature. He was a person who was an ambassador. He's a former minister within the Republic of South Africa. He's a former high-profile politician within the echelons of the African National Congress. And it is only befitting to have this sort of farewell for him, despite the circumstances around his passing and his death being unclear at this point in time. But what we can say is that the certain rituals and customs that are done if someone commits suicide are not being followed this time around.
Samgele, we're going to leave it there at this given moment. Samgele Maseko, SABC News senior reporter, is live to us from the King Shaka International Airport at that special area where the mortal remains of the late Nathi Mthethwa have, of course, or are expected to be received by family as well as colleagues. And we will definitely take you live as soon as those proceedings get underway.